Question 1. Assessment of the process for granting a user access to a sensitive IBM Domino database, considering best practices for security and operational efficiency. A user submits an informal email request to an administrator, stating they need access to the sales figures database for a new project. Option A. The administrator grants immediate access to the database, assuming the user's request is legitimate and necessary for their project. Option B. The administrator grants broad read and write access to all users who request it for project-related work to ensure no one is hindered. Option C. The administrator forwards the request to the user's manager without further verification, assuming the manager will handle the approval. Option D. The administrator verifies the user's role and project requirement against documented access policies and obtains formal approval before granting access. The correct answer is D. The administrator verifies the user's role and project requirements against documented access policies and obtains formal approval before granting access. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in IT administration, balancing system performance and security with user accessibility and productivity. In the context of IBM Notes and Domino fundamentals, this often involves managing user access to databases and applications, which directly impacts data security and compliance. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying security policies effectively without unduly hindering legitimate business operations. The correct approach prioritizes a systematic and documented process for granting access, aligning with the principle of least privilege and adhering to established security policies. This involves verifying user roles and responsibilities against documented requirements before granting access. This aligns with best practices for data governance and security, which are implicitly supported by the need for organizations to maintain secure and auditable systems, a fundamental aspect of responsible IT management. While the C2040-442 exam syllabus doesn't specify a particular jurisdiction's regulations, the principles of due diligence, accountability, and data protection are universally recognized in professional IT practice. Granting access based on a verified need, documented in a request and approval process, ensures that access is appropriate and auditable, minimizing the risk of unauthorized access and data breaches. An incorrect approach would be to grant access based on informal requests or assumptions about a user's role. This bypasses established security protocols and creates significant risks. It violates the principle of least privilege, potentially exposing sensitive data to individuals who do not require it for their job functions. Furthermore, it undermines the audit trail, making it difficult to determine who granted access and why, which is a critical failure in accountability and could have implications if a security incident occurs. Another incorrect approach would be to grant broad access to all users by default, assuming they will only access what they need. This is a severe security vulnerability, directly contravening the principle of least privilege and exposing the organization to a high risk of data compromise. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of fundamental security concepts and a failure to implement basic protective measures. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the organization's security policies and procedures. They should then evaluate each access request against these policies, verifying the requester's role and the necessity of the access. Documentation is key. All requests and approvals should be recorded. If there is any ambiguity, the administrator should seek clarification from the user's manager or the security team before proceeding. This structured, policy-driven approach ensures that access is granted responsibly and securely. Question 2. Comparative studies suggest that when managing user access and data integrity within an IBM Notes/Domino environment, a proactive and layered approach is crucial for maintaining system security and operational efficiency. Considering the fundamental principles of system administration and data governance, which of the following strategies best aligns with these best practices? Option A. Implement a granular access control model based on the principle of least privilege, regularly audit user permissions, and establish a comprehensive data backup and disaster recovery plan. Option B. Defer all security configuration and user permission management to individual users, allowing them to manage their own access levels as needed. Option C. Rely solely on the default security settings provided by IBM Notes/Domino without any custom configuration or regular review. Option D. Grant all users full administrative privileges to the Domino server, to ensure maximum flexibility and ease of access for all tasks. The correct answer is A. Implement a granular access control model based on the principle of least privilege, regularly audit user permissions, and establish a comprehensive data backup and disaster recovery plan. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in IT environments where the need for efficient data management and user access must be balanced with robust security and compliance requirements. The professional challenge lies in implementing a solution that is both technically sound and adheres to the principles of data integrity and access control, which are implicitly governed by best practices in system administration, and potentially by broader data protection regulations, depending on the nature of the data stored in IBM Notes/Domino. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that minimizes risk while maximizing usability. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes security and data integrity through a layered defense strategy. Implementing a robust access control model, regularly auditing user permissions, and ensuring data backups are in place directly addresses the core responsibilities of system administration. These actions align with the general principles of responsible data handling and system maintenance, which are foundational to maintaining a secure and reliable IT infrastructure. While the C2040-442 exam focuses on technical fundamentals, the underlying implication is that these technical implementations must support a secure and compliant operational environment. An incorrect approach that involves granting broad administrative privileges to all users without a clear justification or audit trail is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This lack of granular control increases the attack surface, making the system vulnerable to accidental or malicious data alteration or deletion. It violates the principle of least privilege, a fundamental security concept. Another incorrect approach, such as neglecting regular backups or disaster recovery planning, represents a failure to uphold the duty of care to protect organizational data. This can lead to data loss, operational disruption, and potential noncompliance with data retention policies or legal discovery obligations, even if not explicitly detailed in the exam syllabus. These are inherent risks of poor system management. Failing to document and regularly review security configurations and access policies is also a failure, as it hinders accountability and makes it difficult to identify and rectify security weaknesses. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, understanding the business requirements for data access and management, and then designing a solution that implements the principle of least privilege. This includes defining roles and responsibilities, establishing clear access control lists, and implementing regular monitoring and auditing mechanisms. Professionals should always consult relevant organizational policies and industry best practices for system administration and data security. Question 3. The evaluation methodology shows that a critical aspect of maintaining a secure IBM Notes and Domino environment involves the regular review and management of user access privileges. Which of the following approaches best represents a professional and compliant method for ensuring that user access remains appropriate and secure? Option A. Revoking all user access after a fixed period, such as 90 days, regardless of the user's ongoing role or the business necessity of their access. Option B. Promptly granting all access requests submitted by users, assuming their need is legitimate, and only reviewing access when a security incident occurs. Option C. Implementing a scheduled, documented process for auditing user access rights against current job roles and business requirements, with a clear procedure for revoking unnecessary privileges. Option D. Assigning a single administrator complete authority to manage all user access reviews and modifications without any independent verification or oversight. The correct answer is C. Implementing a scheduled, documented process for auditing user access rights against current job roles and business requirements, with a clear procedure for revoking unnecessary privileges. Explanation: the evaluation methodology shows a critical need for understanding how to properly assess and implement security best practices within an IBM Notes and Domino environment, particularly concerning user access and data protection. The challenge lies in balancing robust security with user productivity and operational efficiency, all while adhering to the principles of least privilege and data segregation. Professionals must navigate the complexities of Domino's security model, which can be granular, but also prone to misconfiguration if not managed diligently. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic and documented process for reviewing and revoking access. This aligns with fundamental security principles and regulatory expectations for data governance and access control. By regularly auditing user access rights against their current job functions and business needs, organizations can proactively identify and mitigate risks associated with excessive privileges. This practice directly supports compliance with data protection regulations that mandate appropriate controls over sensitive information and ensure that only authorized personnel can access it. The principle of least privilege, a cornerstone of secure system design, is actively enforced through this method. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on user requests for access without independent verification fails to uphold the principle of least privilege. This can lead to unauthorized access to sensitive data, increasing the risk of data breaches and noncompliance with data protection laws. It bypasses essential security checkpoints and relies on potentially uninformed user requests, creating a significant security vulnerability. Another incorrect approach, which involves revoking access based on arbitrary timelines without considering the actual business need or role of the user, is equally problematic. This can disrupt legitimate business operations and lead to productivity losses. While security is paramount, it must be implemented in a way that is proportionate and aligned with business requirements. Such an approach lacks the necessary due diligence and can be seen as a failure to implement a risk-based security strategy, potentially violating principles of operational efficiency and good governance. Finally, an approach that relies on a single individual to manage all access reviews without any form of oversight or segregation of duties creates a single point of failure and a high risk of error or malicious intent. This violates fundamental internal control principles and significantly increases the likelihood of security lapses, making it a professionally unacceptable practice. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve establishing clear policies and procedures for access management, including regular audits, a documented request and approval process, and a defined process for access revocation. This process should be risk-based, ensuring that the most critical data and systems receive the highest level of scrutiny. Collaboration between IT security, business unit managers, and compliance officers is essential to ensure that access rights are appropriate and aligned with both security requirements and business needs. Question 4. To address the challenge of upgrading a critical IBM Notes and Domino application server to a new version with enhanced security features, which of the following approaches best ensures data integrity and minimizes disruption to end users? Option A. Immediately initiate a rollback to the previous version as soon as any minor error is encountered during the upgrade process. Option B. Implement the upgrade in a phased rollout, starting with a pilot group of users and progressively expanding to the entire user base after successful validation. Option C. Deploy the upgrade directly to all production servers simultaneously during a scheduled maintenance window. Option D. Perform the upgrade during the busiest operational hours to leverage existing user activity for immediate testing. The correct answer is C. Deploy the upgrade directly to all production servers simultaneously during a scheduled maintenance window. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in IBM Notes and Domino environments, ensuring data integrity and user access during a critical system upgrade. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for uninterrupted business operations with the imperative to perform a thorough and secure upgrade. A rushed or poorly planned upgrade can lead to data corruption, security vulnerabilities, and significant downtime, impacting client trust and regulatory compliance. The decision maker must consider the technical complexities of the upgrade, the potential impact on end users and business processes, and the need to adhere to established IT governance and security best practices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout strategy, beginning with a pilot deployment to a limited group of users. This represents best professional practice because it allows for the identification and resolution of unforeseen issues in a controlled environment before a full-scale deployment. This minimizes the risk of widespread disruption and data loss. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this approach demonstrates due diligence in safeguarding client data and ensuring service continuity, which are often implicit or explicit requirements in IT service delivery agreements and general business ethics. It aligns with principles of risk management and responsible system administration. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the upgrade directly to all users without prior testing or a pilot phase represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It disregards the fundamental principle of risk mitigation, potentially exposing all users to data corruption or system instability. This could lead to breaches of service-level agreements and, in regulated industries, violations of data protection and business continuity regulations. Performing the upgrade during peak business hours without adequate communication or contingency plans is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of consideration for the impact on end users and business operations, leading to potential productivity losses and client dissatisfaction. Ethically, it fails to uphold the responsibility to provide a stable and reliable service. Rolling back the upgrade immediately after encountering the first minor issue, without attempting to troubleshoot or understand the root cause, indicates a lack of technical proficiency and a failure to adequately plan for potential problems. While caution is necessary, an immediate rollback without investigation can be inefficient and may indicate insufficient preparation for the upgrade process, potentially leading to repeated issues and prolonged downtime. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach system upgrades by first conducting a thorough risk assessment. This involves identifying potential technical challenges, data integrity risks, and user impact. A phased implementation plan, including a pilot deployment, is crucial for validating the upgrade process and identifying issues in a controlled manner. Clear communication channels with stakeholders and end users are essential throughout the process. Contingency plans, including rollback procedures, should be well defined and tested. The decision-making process should prioritize data integrity, system stability, and minimal disruption to business operations, aligning with professional ethics and any applicable regulatory requirements for service continuity and data protection. Question 5. The control framework reveals that during a planned migration of critical business data from an older IBM Domino server to a new Domino environment, the primary concern is maintaining data confidentiality and integrity throughout the transition. Which of the following implementation strategies best adheres to this control framework? Option A. Utilize third-party data migration tools that offer high-speed transfer capabilities, without a specific focus on replicating Domino's native security configurations. Option B. Migrate data to a temporary, unsecured file share before importing it into the new Domino server, assuming the data will be secured once it resides on the new system. Option C. Migrate data by temporarily disabling all security features on both the source and target servers to expedite the process, and re-enable them post-migration. Option D. Implement a migration plan that leverages Domino's native security features, ensuring that existing access control lists, ACL, are preserved and sensitive data fields are encrypted on the new server. The correct answer is C. Migrate data by temporarily disabling all security features on both the source and target servers to expedite the process, and re-enable them post-migration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in IBM Notes and Domino environments, ensuring data integrity and access control during a migration or upgrade. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient data transfer with the imperative to maintain security and compliance. Without a robust control framework, there's a significant risk of unauthorized access, data corruption, or loss of audit trails, all of which can have severe regulatory and operational consequences. The professional challenge is to design and execute a process that minimizes these risks while achieving the technical objectives. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging the built-in security features of IBM Domino, such as ACLs, access control lists, and encryption, in conjunction with a carefully planned migration strategy. This ensures that data remains protected throughout the process. Specifically, migrating data to a new Domino server, while maintaining the original ACLs and applying appropriate encryption to sensitive fields, directly addresses the control framework's requirements for data confidentiality and integrity. This aligns with best practices for data handling and security, which are implicitly or explicitly mandated by various data protection regulations. Though specific regulations are not cited here due to exam constraints, the use of Domino's native security mechanisms is a demonstration of understanding and applying the platform's capabilities to meet security and compliance objectives. Incorrect approach is analysis. Disabling security features during migration to speed up the process is a direct violation of data protection principles and would likely contraindicate any applicable regulatory or ethical guidelines concerning data security. This approach creates a window of vulnerability, exposing sensitive data to unauthorized access or modification. Migrating data without considering or preserving existing access controls, ACL, leads to a loss of granular security. This can result in users having access to data they are not authorized to see, which is a significant security and compliance failure. It undermines the principle of least privilege. Relying solely on external, non-Domino specific tools for data migration without validating their security compliance or their ability to preserve Domino's security attributes introduces unknown risks. This approach bypasses the platform's inherent security controls and can lead to data exposure or integrity issues that are difficult to trace and rectify within the Domino environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such implementation challenges by first thoroughly understanding the existing control framework and the specific security and compliance requirements. This involves a risk assessment to identify potential vulnerabilities during the migration. The chosen solution must then be evaluated against these requirements, prioritizing native platform security features where possible. A phased approach with rigorous testing and validation at each stage is crucial. Documentation of the entire process, including security configurations and access controls, is essential for auditability and future reference. When in doubt, consulting platform documentation and security best practices is paramount. Question 6. The audit findings indicate that sensitive customer data is being transmitted via email without consistent encryption, posing a significant risk of unauthorized disclosure and potential regulatory noncompliance. The IT department has identified several potential approaches to address this vulnerability within the existing IBM Notes and Domino infrastructure. Which of the following approaches best addresses the audit findings and aligns with professional best practices for data security and regulatory compliance? Option A. Deactivate mail encryption features within Domino to alleviate user concerns about performance and complexity, focusing on other security measures. Option B. Deploy mail encryption only for internal communications between specific high-security departments, excluding external communications and other departments. Option C. Advise users to manually encrypt emails containing sensitive data when they deem it necessary, relying on individual judgment to determine the level of risk. Option D. Implement a mandatory policy for all outbound emails containing identified sensitive data fields to be automatically encrypted using Domino's native encryption capabilities, coupled with user training on best practices for handling sensitive information. The correct answer is D. Implement a mandatory policy for all outbound emails containing identified sensitive data fields to be automatically encrypted using Domino's native encryption capabilities, coupled with user training on best practices for handling sensitive information. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge where a critical security feature, mail encryption, is not consistently applied across the organization. The audit findings highlight a potential gap in data protection, which can lead to regulatory noncompliance and reputational damage. The challenge lies in balancing the need for robust security with the practicalities of user adoption and system performance within the IBM Notes and Domino environment. The core issue is ensuring that sensitive information transmitted via email is adequately protected, a requirement often mandated by data privacy regulations. Correct approach analysis. Implementing a policy that enforces mail encryption for all outbound mail containing sensitive data, leveraging Domino's built-in encryption capabilities, and potentially integrating with third-party solutions if necessary, represents best professional practice. This approach directly addresses the audit finding by proactively securing sensitive communications. It aligns with the principle of least privilege and data minimization, ensuring that only authorized recipients can access the content. From a regulatory perspective, this proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to data protection and compliance with relevant data privacy laws, such as those requiring the safeguarding of personally identifiable information, PI, or confidential business data. This approach minimizes the risk of data breaches and associated penalties. Incorrect approach is analysis. Allowing individual users to decide whether to encrypt sensitive emails is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach relies on user discretion, which is notoriously unreliable for security-critical functions. It creates a high risk of sensitive data being transmitted unencrypted, violating data protection regulations, and potentially exposing the organization to severe penalties and loss of trust. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in implementing security controls. Disabling mail encryption entirely due to user complaints about complexity or performance issues is another regulatory and ethical failure. While user experience is important, it cannot supersede fundamental security requirements. This action directly contravenes the principle of protecting sensitive data and would likely result in non-compliance with data privacy laws. It signals a disregard for security best practices and a failure to adequately manage the risks associated with email communications. Implementing encryption only for a small subset of highly sensitive internal communications, while ignoring external communications or less obviously sensitive data, is also professionally unacceptable. This creates an inconsistent security posture and leaves significant vulnerabilities. Data privacy regulations often apply broadly to sensitive information, regardless of whether it is internal or external. This selective approach fails to provide comprehensive protection and leaves the organization exposed to risks that could have been mitigated. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this challenge by first understanding the specific types of sensitive data being transmitted and the relevant regulatory requirements governing its protection. A risk assessment should be conducted to identify the most critical areas for encryption. The chosen solution should be technically feasible within the IBM Notes and Domino environment, with a clear plan for user training and support to ensure adoption and minimize disruption. Continuous monitoring and periodic review of the encryption policy and its effectiveness are essential to maintain compliance and adapt to evolving threats and regulations. The decision-making process should prioritize data security and regulatory compliance, while also considering operational impact and user experience. Question 7. Governance review demonstrates that access control lists, ACL, in several critical IBM Notes databases grant users permissions that exceed those explicitly defined in the organization's data access policy. The review also noted that some of these databases contain sensitive customer information, potentially subject to data privacy regulations. Which of the following approaches best addresses this implementation challenge? Option A. Conduct a detailed audit of the ACLs in the identified databases, cross-referencing them with the organization's data access policy and relevant data privacy regulations. Develop and implement a remediation plan based on the principle of least privilege, ensuring all changes are documented and tested. Option B. Rely on the default security settings of IBM Notes for these databases, assuming they will provide adequate protection. Option C. Immediately revoke all elevated permissions found in the identified databases to ensure compliance with the governance review findings. Option D. Delegate the task of reviewing and adjusting ACLs to the IT support team without further consultation with business unit managers or compliance officers. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed audit of the ACLs in the identified databases, cross-referencing them with the organization's data access policy and relevant data privacy regulations. Develop and implement a remediation plan based on the principle of least privilege, ensuring all changes are documented and tested. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in IBM Notes and Domino environments, ensuring that user access controls are not only technically sound, but also align with established organizational policies and regulatory requirements. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient data access with the imperative of data security and compliance. A governance review highlighting a discrepancy between documented policies and actual system configurations indicates a potential risk of unauthorized access, data breaches, or non-compliance with data protection regulations. This requires a careful, systematic approach to identify the root cause and implement corrective actions without disrupting business operations or introducing new vulnerabilities. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented process of reviewing the existing access control lists, ACL, within the relevant notes databases. This review must be cross-referenced against the documented security policies and any applicable regulatory frameworks, e.g., data privacy laws relevant to the jurisdiction of the exam, which is assumed to be U.S.-based for this context, implying adherence to regulations like HIPAA for healthcare data or SOX for financial data if applicable to the data in question. The goal is to identify specific instances where ACL entries grant broader access than authorized by policy or regulation. Once discrepancies are found, a controlled remediation plan should be developed and executed, involving the principle of least privilege. This means granting users only the minimum access necessary to perform their job functions. All changes must be logged, tested, and communicated to affected users and stakeholders. This systematic, policy-driven, and documented approach ensures that the remediation is effective, auditable, and compliant, representing best professional practice. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately revoke all access for users whose permissions appear to exceed documented policy without further investigation. This is professionally unacceptable because it fails to consider the operational impact and may lead to significant business disruption. It also bypasses the necessary due diligence to confirm the discrepancy and understand the context of the access. This approach could violate ethical considerations regarding fair treatment of employees and could lead to regulatory issues if essential business functions are impeded without proper justification or notice. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the system's default security settings without a specific review of the identified databases. This is professionally unacceptable, as it assumes that defaults are always appropriate and doesn't address the specific findings of the governance review. It ignores the possibility that configurations may have been intentionally altered over time, potentially in violation of policy or regulation. This passive approach fails to proactively manage security risks and could leave the organization vulnerable to breaches or non-compliance. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the remediation solely to the IT department, without involving the business unit owners or compliance officers. This is professionally unacceptable because IT may not fully understand the business context or the specific regulatory implications of data access. This can lead to overrestriction or underrestriction of access, both of which have negative consequences. It also fails to ensure accountability across different organizational functions, which is crucial for maintaining a robust governance framework. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing this type of implementation challenge should adopt a structured, risk-based decision-making process. First, thoroughly understand the findings of the governance review and the specific systems or data involved. Second, consult relevant organizational policies and any applicable external regulations to establish the baseline for acceptable access. Third, conduct a detailed technical audit of the identified systems to confirm the discrepancies. Fourth, develop a remediation plan that prioritizes critical risks and minimizes business disruption, adhering to the principle of least privilege. Fifth, implement the changes in a controlled manner with thorough testing and rollback capabilities. Finally, document all actions taken, communicate changes to stakeholders, and establish ongoing monitoring to prevent recurrence. This methodical approach ensures that technical solutions are aligned with business objectives and regulatory mandates. Question 8. Consider a scenario where a large enterprise uses IBM Notes and Domino for its internal collaboration and data management. The company has several distinct departments, each with its own set of databases containing sensitive information. When an employee transitions from one department to another or leaves the company, their access to these departmental databases needs to be promptly and accurately updated to reflect their new role or to be revoked entirely. The IT administration team is struggling with a manual process that is time-consuming and prone to errors, leading to potential security gaps. What is the most effective and secure approach for managing user access changes across these departmental databases within the IBM Notes and Domino environment? Option A. Implement a system where each department's databases have their own organizational units, with specific access control lists, ACL, that are updated when user roles or departmental affiliations change. Option B. Manually update the ACL of every database a user has access to when their departmental affiliation changes or they leave the company. Option C. Establish a single, organization-wide ACL that grants broad access to all users across all databases to simplify administration. Option D. Grant all users within a department manager or designer access to all databases within that department's OU by default. The correct answer is A. Implement a system where each department's databases have their own organizational units, OU, with specific access control lists, ACL, that are updated when user roles or departmental affiliations change. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in IBM Notes and Domino environments, managing user access and data security across different organizational units with varying compliance requirements. The core challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient user provisioning and deallocation, with the imperative to adhere to strict data access controls mandated by internal policies and potentially external regulations. Though for this exam, we focus on the internal framework and best practices as defined by IBM's product capabilities and general IT security principles. The risk of unauthorized access or data leakage due to misconfigured security settings is significant, impacting both operational efficiency and the organization's integrity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging the hierarchical security model inherent in IBM Notes and Domino, specifically through the use of organizational units OU and access control lists, ACL, by creating distinct OUs for each department and assigning specific ACLs to these OUs. Administrators can granularly control who has access to what data and what actions they can perform. When a user leaves a department, their access can be revoked by removing them from the relevant OU or by modifying the OU's ACL to exclude them. This method ensures that access is tied to roles and departmental responsibilities, aligning with the principle of least privilege. It also provides a clear audit trail of access assignments and modifications, which is crucial for compliance and security. This approach represents best professional practice because it is systematic, scalable, and directly addresses the need for role-based access control and efficient user lifecycle management within the Notes/Domino architecture. Incorrect approaches analysis. Manually modifying the ACL of every database a user had access to when they leave a department is a highly inefficient and error-prone method. This approach fails to leverage the hierarchical security features of Domino, leading to inconsistent security configurations and a high risk of overlooking specific databases. It is professionally unacceptable because it introduces significant security vulnerabilities and makes auditing access extremely difficult. Granting broad manager or designer access to all users within a department's OU, even if intended to simplify initial setup, is a direct violation of the principle of least privilege. This overprovisioning of access increases the attack surface and the potential for accidental or malicious data modification or deletion. It is professionally unacceptable as it creates an unnecessary security risk and undermines the integrity of the data. Implementing a single, overarching ACL for the entire organization that grants broad access to all users across all databases is the most egregious failure. This approach completely disregards departmental boundaries and specific data sensitivity, leading to widespread unauthorized access and a severe breach of data confidentiality and integrity. It is professionally unacceptable and would likely violate any reasonable internal security policy or data governance framework. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach user access management by first understanding the organizational structure and data sensitivity. They should then map these requirements to the security features provided by the platform. In this case, IBM Notes and Domino's OU and ACL structure. The decision-making process should prioritize a systematic and scalable approach that adheres to the principle of least privilege. This involves designing security policies that are granular, auditable, and easily manageable throughout the user lifecycle. When faced with implementation challenges, professionals should always refer to the platform's best practices and documentation, and consider the long-term implications of their chosen approach on security, compliance, and operational efficiency. Question 9. The investigation demonstrates that a critical IBM Notes database migration project is experiencing significant delays due to unexpected data inconsistencies discovered during the initial transfer to the new platform. The project manager is under pressure to accelerate the timeline. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for speed with the imperative to maintain data integrity and regulatory compliance? Option A. Proceed with the migration to the new platform, focusing on essential data fields only, and defer the resolution of inconsistencies in less critical fields to a post-migration phase. Option B. Expedite the migration by disabling certain data validation rules in the new platform to allow for faster data ingestion, with the intention of re-enabling them once the bulk of the data is transferred. Option C. Implement a full rollback to the original system, conduct a deep forensic analysis of the source data for corruption, and then reinitiate the migration with a more robust data cleansing script. Option D. Halt the migration immediately, perform a comprehensive validation of all migrated data against the source system's integrity checks, and then resume the migration in controlled phases with intermediate validation points. Correct answer is C. Implement a full rollback to the original system, conduct a deep forensic analysis of the source data for corruption, and then reinitiate the migration with a more robust data cleansing script. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in IBM Notes and Domino environments, ensuring data integrity and compliance during a migration or upgrade. A professional challenge lies in balancing the need for rapid deployment with the imperative to maintain data security, privacy, and auditability, all while adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing the organization's operations. The pressure to meet deadlines can lead to shortcuts that compromise these critical aspects. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased migration strategy with rigorous validation at each stage. This aligns with best professional practices by prioritizing data integrity and compliance. Specifically, it ensures that data is not only transferred, but also verified for accuracy and completeness against established baselines. This methodical process allows for the identification and remediation of any discrepancies before they impact end users or regulatory reporting. Adherence to the specified regulatory framework, which for this exam is assumed to be US-centric, focusing on data privacy and security principles, would mandate such a controlled and verifiable process to prevent unauthorized access, data loss, or misrepresentation of information. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that bypasses intermediate validation steps and relies solely on post-migration checks is professionally unacceptable. This introduces a significant risk of undetected data corruption or loss, which could lead to regulatory violations related to data accuracy and reporting. Ethically, it fails to uphold the duty of care to protect client or organizational data. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed over thoroughness by skipping detailed data mapping and transformation logic reviews. This can result in data being misinterpreted or incorrectly formatted in the new system, leading to functional issues and potential noncompliance with data standards or reporting requirements. This demonstrates a failure to exercise due diligence. Finally, an approach that neglects to document the migration process and validation results is also professionally unsound. This lack of documentation hinders future audits, troubleshooting, and compliance verification. It violates principles of transparency and accountability, making it difficult to demonstrate adherence to regulatory mandates. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such implementation challenges should adopt a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves identifying potential risks to data integrity, security, and compliance, and then implementing controls to mitigate those risks. A structured approach, including detailed planning, phased execution, continuous validation, and comprehensive documentation, is essential. When faced with time pressures, it is crucial to communicate potential risks to stakeholders and advocate for the necessary resources and time to ensure a compliant and robust implementation, rather than compromising on critical controls. Question 10. Upon reviewing the Access Control List, ACL, for a critical IBM Domino database containing sensitive customer financial data, an administrator discovers that the current configuration grants manager access to all authenticated users within the organization. This poses a significant security risk. Which of the following approaches represents the most professionally responsible and secure method for reconfiguring the ACL to protect the data while ensuring legitimate access? Option A. Remove all users from the ACL and instruct them to contact the IT help desk for ad hoc access requests on a case-by-case basis. Option B. Reconfigure the ACL to assign specific roles, e.g., reader, author, editor based on user job functions and responsibilities, ensuring each user has only the minimum necessary permissions. Option C. Grant no access to all users and then individually add exceptions for each user who requires access, meticulously documenting each exception. Option D. Change the depositor role for all users, allowing them to create new records but preventing any interaction with existing data. The correct answer is B. Reconfigure the ACL to assign specific roles, e.g., reader, author, editor, based on user job functions and responsibilities, ensuring each user has only the minimum necessary permissions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in IBM Notes and Domino environments, managing user access and permissions for sensitive data. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for data accessibility for authorized users with the imperative to protect confidential information from unauthorized disclosure. This requires a thorough understanding of Domino's security model, including the implications of different ACL access control list, settings, and the potential for unintended access. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with data protection policies and to prevent security breaches. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a granular and role-based assignment of permissions within the Domino database's access control list ACL. This aligns with the principle of least privilege, a fundamental security best practice. By assigning specific roles, e.g., reader, author, editor, to users or groups, administrators ensure that individuals only have the minimum access necessary to perform their job functions. This minimizes the attack surface and reduces the risk of accidental or malicious data exposure. This approach is professionally sound, as it directly supports the organization's internal data governance policies and any relevant industry-specific data handling regulations that mandate controlled access to sensitive information. It promotes accountability by clearly defining who can access what data and under what conditions. Incorrect approach is analysis. Granting manager or designer access to all users is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. The manager role in Domino grants extensive control, including the ability to delete the database, modify ACLs, and replicate the database, far exceeding the typical needs of end users. This violates the principle of least privilege and creates a high risk of accidental or intentional data corruption or deletion. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for data integrity and security. The designer role, while less powerful than manager, still allows modification of the database's design elements, which could inadvertently impact security settings or data structure, leading to potential data loss or unauthorized access. This approach fails to uphold any reasonable data protection standards, granting no access to all users, and then individually adding exceptions for specific users is inefficient and prone to errors. While it adheres to the principle of least privilege in theory, the practical implementation of managing numerous individual exceptions becomes complex and difficult to audit. This can lead to oversight, where legitimate access is denied, or, conversely, where unintended access is granted due to the complexity of managing exceptions. It creates an administrative burden that increases the likelihood of security misconfigurations. Ethically, while not as egregious as granting excessive permissions, it can hinder legitimate business operations and demonstrate a lack of proactive security planning. Granting depositor access to all users is also problematic. The depositor role allows users to create new documents but does not permit them to read, edit, or delete existing documents. While this might seem like a controlled approach for data entry, it fails to address the need for users to access and potentially update existing records, which is a common requirement for many business processes. This limitation can lead to operational inefficiencies and frustration. Furthermore, it doesn't prevent users from creating duplicate or irrelevant data, which can clutter the database and make it harder to manage. From a security perspective, it doesn't inherently protect existing data from unauthorized viewing or modification if other access levels are not properly managed. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with implementing access control should always begin by understanding the data's sensitivity and the roles and responsibilities of the users who need to interact with it. A risk-based approach is crucial. This involves identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, assessing the impact of a security breach, and then designing controls to mitigate those risks. The principle of least privilege should be the guiding tenet. In configuring permissions, it is best practice to start with the most restrictive settings and progressively grant access as needed, always documenting the rationale for each permission granted. Regular audits of ACLs are essential to ensure they remain appropriate and compliant with evolving organizational policies and regulatory requirements. This proactive and systematic approach minimizes risk and ensures that security measures are effective and sustainable. Question 11. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a department manager is requesting direct access to a specific user's mail database within IBM Notes to retrieve historical communication for an urgent project, bypassing the standard procedure of submitting a formal data retrieval request through IT. Option A. Escalate the request to the IT security team and the data privacy officer for review and guidance, explaining the manager's urgent need, but also highlighting the security and privacy implications of direct access. Option B. Attempt to create a temporary ad hoc access method for the manager to retrieve the data, assuming it will be a quick and isolated event. Option C. Inform the manager that their request cannot be fulfilled and advise them to follow the standard IT procedure without offering any further assistance. Option D. Grant the manager direct access to the user's mail database immediately to ensure the urgent project is not delayed. The correct answer is A. Escalate the request to the IT security team and the data privacy officer for review and guidance, explaining the manager's urgent need, but also highlighting the security and privacy implications of direct access. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a stakeholder's request and the established security and privacy protocols of IBM Notes and Domino. The request, if fulfilled without proper consideration, could lead to unauthorized access or disclosure of sensitive information, potentially violating data protection principles. Careful judgment is required to balance stakeholder needs with the imperative to maintain data integrity and confidentiality. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to established security policies and regulatory compliance. By escalating the request through the appropriate channels and seeking a formal review, the professional demonstrates a commitment to responsible data handling. This aligns with the fundamental ethical principles of safeguarding information and respecting user privacy, which are implicitly supported by the operational guidelines and security best practices inherent in IBM Notes and Domino environments. The process ensures that any deviation from standard procedures is thoroughly vetted, documented, and authorized, mitigating risks of breaches or misuse. An incorrect approach that involves directly granting the request without authorization would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This bypasses established security controls, potentially exposing sensitive data to individuals who are not authorized to access it. Such an action could violate data privacy regulations and internal company policies, leading to reputational damage and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the request or providing a dismissive response, fails to address the stakeholder's needs and can damage professional relationships. While it avoids immediate security risks, it neglects the importance of stakeholder engagement and problem solving, which are crucial for effective system management and user satisfaction. This approach can lead to frustration and a perception of unresponsiveness. A third incorrect approach, like attempting to implement a workaround without proper understanding or authorization, introduces unforeseen security vulnerabilities. This can lead to data corruption, system instability, or unintended data exposure, all of which are serious professional and ethical breaches. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the request and its potential implications. 2. Consulting relevant policies, procedures, and regulatory guidelines. 3. Assessing the risks associated with fulfilling or denying the request. 4. Escalating the request to the appropriate authority or team for review and decision-making. 5. Documenting the request, the decision, and the rationale. 6. Communicating the outcome clearly to the stakeholder. Question 12. Examination of the data shows a pattern of unusual activity within a specific user group's Lotus Notes database, potentially indicating unauthorized access or misuse of confidential information. As a system administrator, you have the technical capability to access and analyze the contents of these databases. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Immediately access and analyze the contents of the affected user databases to identify the source of the unusual activity and gather evidence. Option B. Ignore the unusual activity, assuming it is a minor anomaly that will resolve itself without intervention. Option C. Begin a broad audit of all user databases to identify similar patterns, without first confirming the specific nature of the initial anomaly. Option D. Report the observed pattern of unusual activity to your direct supervisor and the IT security team, requesting guidance on how to proceed with an investigation according to established company policy. Correct answer is A. Immediately access and analyze the contents of the affected user databases to identify the source of the unusual activity and gather evidence. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential for misuse of sensitive information within a corporate environment. The core ethical dilemma lies in balancing the need for data analysis with the obligation to protect user privacy and adhere to data handling policies. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any investigation is conducted ethically and within the bounds of established guidelines. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to established policies and legal frameworks governing data access and usage. By seeking explicit authorization and involving the appropriate oversight bodies, the individual demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and data privacy. This aligns with the principles of responsible data management, which are often codified in corporate policies and may have legal implications related to data protection and user confidentiality. An incorrect approach that involves directly accessing and analyzing user data without proper authorization would constitute a significant ethical and potentially legal failure. This action violates principles of user privacy and could breach data protection regulations, leading to severe consequences for both the individual and the organization. Such unauthorized access undermines trust and can expose the company to legal liabilities. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the potential issue and taking no action, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to uphold the responsibility to address potential data misuse. It can lead to a continuation of unethical practices and a failure to protect sensitive information, which can have long-term detrimental effects on the organization's reputation and legal standing. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of organizational policies, relevant data protection laws, and ethical guidelines. When faced with a potential issue, the first step should always be to consult these resources. If ambiguity exists, seeking guidance from management, legal counsel, or an ethics committee is crucial. Transparency and a commitment to acting within authorized parameters are paramount. Question 13. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a critical client financial data database in IBM Domino has been inadvertently accessed by unauthorized internal personnel. The exposure was not due to malicious intent, but rather a misconfiguration of access permissions. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to address this security lapse and prevent recurrence? Option A. Immediately delete all records within the affected database to ensure no further unauthorized access can occur. Option B. Apply a blanket restriction, revoking access to all sensitive databases for all users until a full audit can be completed. Option C. Issue a formal reprimand to the individual user identified as having accessed the data and assume the issue is resolved. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the database's access control list, ACL, and user group memberships, implement stricter access rules based on the principle of least privilege, and reinforce user training on data handling policies. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the database's access control list, ACL, and user group memberships, implement stricter access rules based on the principle of least privilege, and reinforce user training on data handling policies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in managing sensitive information within an organization using IBM Notes and Domino. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient information sharing and collaboration with the imperative to protect confidential data from unauthorized access. The accidental exposure of client financial data, even if internal, carries significant reputational and potential legal risks, especially if it falls under data protection regulations. The challenge is to identify the root cause and implement a robust solution that prevents recurrence without unduly hindering legitimate business operations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that addresses both the technical and procedural aspects of data security. This includes reviewing and potentially reconfiguring access control lists, ACL, within Domino databases to ensure that only authorized users have access to sensitive information. Furthermore, implementing or reinforcing data classification policies and user training on handling confidential data are crucial. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and least privilege, which are fundamental to data protection frameworks. By systematically identifying and rectifying the access control vulnerabilities and reinforcing user awareness, the organization demonstrates a commitment to safeguarding sensitive data, which is a key requirement under data protection regulations. This proactive and comprehensive approach minimizes the risk of future breaches and upholds professional responsibility. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely focus on deleting the exposed data without investigating the cause. This is a reactive measure that fails to address the underlying security flaw, leaving the system vulnerable to similar incidents. It represents a failure to implement adequate controls and a disregard for the principles of risk management, potentially violating regulatory requirements for data breach notification and remediation. Another incorrect approach is to broadly restrict access to all databases for all users. While this might seem like a quick fix, it severely hampers productivity and collaboration, which is detrimental to business operations. More importantly, it fails to implement granular access controls, which is a core tenet of secure data management. This overrestriction can lead to inefficiencies and may not fully comply with regulations that expect proportionate security measures, not blanket prohibitions that impede legitimate business functions. Third incorrect approach is to blame the individual user, who may have inadvertently caused the exposure, without a thorough investigation of system configurations and policies. This deflects responsibility from the organizational security framework and fails to identify systemic weaknesses. It can also create a culture of fear, discouraging users from reporting potential issues, and does not address the technical or procedural gaps that allowed the exposure to occur, thus failing to meet regulatory obligations for a robust security posture. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with such a situation should adopt a structured problem-solving approach. First, contain the immediate risk by understanding the scope of the exposure. Second, conduct a thorough root cause analysis, examining system configurations, access controls, and user practices. Third, implement corrective actions that are proportionate and effective, focusing on strengthening security controls and enhancing user education. Fourth, document the incident, the investigation, and the remediation steps taken. This systematic process ensures that the organization not only addresses the immediate problem, but also builds resilience against future threats, adhering to professional standards and regulatory expectations for data security and incident management. Question 14. Quality control measures reveal that a user in a critical department has reported being locked out of their IBM Notes and Domino account due to multiple failed login attempts, stating they urgently need access to complete a time-sensitive report. The system administrator is aware of the user's role and the importance of their work, but also knows that bypassing standard lockout procedures requires specific authorization. What is the most appropriate course of action for the system administrator? Option A. Escalate the request to the security team and their direct manager for verification and authorization before taking any action on the account. Option B. Immediately unlock the user's account and reset their password to grant them access, as the urgency of their report is paramount. Option C. Attempt to manually override the lockout mechanism without informing anyone to expedite the process. Option D. Advise the user to wait for the standard lockout resolution process to complete, which may take several hours. Correct answer is B. Immediately unlock the user's account and reset their password to grant them access, as the urgency of their report is paramount. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a potential conflict between maintaining system integrity and fulfilling a user's request that could inadvertently compromise security. The administrator must balance the immediate need for system access with the long-term implications of granting it without proper authorization, especially when the request stems from a perceived urgency. This requires careful judgment to avoid both operational disruption and security breaches. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach is to escalate the request through the established change management and security protocols. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that any modification to system access, particularly for a privileged account, is documented, reviewed, and approved by appropriate authorities. This process mitigates risk by involving individuals with oversight of security policies and system configurations, thereby upholding the integrity and security of the IBM Notes and Domino environment. This adheres to the fundamental principle of least privilege and the need for authorized access control, which are implicit in maintaining a secure and compliant IT infrastructure. Incorrect approaches analysis. Granting immediate access without verification or escalation is a significant security failure. It bypasses established controls designed to prevent unauthorized access and potential data breaches. This action violates the principle of accountability and could lead to a compromised system, exposing sensitive information. Attempting to bypass the standard security protocols by directly modifying user permissions without following the documented change management process is also a failure. While seemingly efficient, it circumvents the necessary checks and balances, increasing the risk of error or malicious intent. This approach disregards the importance of audit trails and the need for transparency in system administration. Ignoring the request and waiting for the user to follow the formal process, while seemingly safe, can also be problematic. It fails to acknowledge the user's stated urgency and could lead to operational inefficiencies or frustration, potentially impacting productivity. While security is paramount, a complete lack of responsiveness can also be detrimental to user support and overall system usability. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that prioritizes security and compliance. This involves understanding the established policies and procedures for system access and modification. When faced with an urgent request, the first step is to acknowledge the request and assess its urgency. However, this assessment must be followed by adherence to the defined protocols for verification and authorization. If the request deviates from standard procedures, it should be escalated to the appropriate security or management personnel for review and approval. Documenting all actions and communications is crucial for accountability and auditing purposes. Question 15. Analysis of a situation where a critical business application running on IBM Domino is experiencing intermittent failures, impacting multiple users. The system administrator suspects a configuration issue within a user's specific notes database that is frequently accessed by the application. To diagnose the problem, the administrator needs to examine the contents of this user's personal notes mail database, which contains sensitive personal and business communications. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Attempt to resolve the application's failure through broader system-level diagnostics and configuration checks that do not involve direct access to individual user mail databases, escalating to direct user data access only as a last resort after exhausting all other options and obtaining explicit consent. Option B. Inform the user that their mail database will be accessed to troubleshoot the application issue and proceed with the access, assuming their consent due to the critical nature of the business problem. Option C. Immediately access the user's notes mail database to identify and correct the suspected configuration issue, as the urgency of the business application's failure justifies the temporary access to resolve the problem quickly. Option D. Access the user's mail database and make the necessary changes without informing the user or seeking explicit consent, reasoning that, as a system administrator, they have implicit authority to access any data on the Domino server for maintenance purposes. The correct answer is C. Immediately access the user's notes mail database to identify and correct the suspected configuration issue, as the urgency of the business application's failure justifies the temporary access to resolve the problem quickly. Explanation. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma concerning data privacy and the responsible use of information within an IBM Notes/Domino environment. The challenge lies in balancing the need for operational efficiency and troubleshooting with the fundamental right to privacy of individuals whose data is stored within the system. The exam syllabus for C2040-442 IBM Notes and Domino Fundamentals implicitly covers the importance of data integrity and security, which are cornerstones of ethical data handling. The correct approach prioritizes obtaining explicit consent and adhering to established data privacy policies before accessing sensitive user information for troubleshooting. This aligns with best professional practices that emphasize transparency, accountability, and respect for individual privacy. In many jurisdictions, including those with strong data protection laws, Unauthorized access or use of personal data without consent is a serious breach of ethical and legal obligations. This approach ensures that any data access is justified, documented, and performed with the knowledge and permission of the affected parties or their representatives, thereby minimizing the risk of privacy violations and maintaining trust. An incorrect approach would involve accessing user data without proper authorization or consent, even if the intention is to resolve a technical issue. This could manifest as a direct violation of data privacy regulations, e.g., GDPR if applicable, or similar principles in other jurisdictions, which mandate that personal data be processed lawfully, fairly, and transparently. Such an action erodes trust, can lead to disciplinary action, and potentially legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach might be to assume consent based on employment status or the nature of the problem, which is a dangerous generalization and bypasses the necessary due diligence required for handling sensitive information. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of data governance principles and the importance of explicit consent mechanisms. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's data privacy policies, relevant legal frameworks, and ethical guidelines. When faced with a potential need to access sensitive user data, a professional should first explore all less intrusive troubleshooting methods. If access to user data is deemed absolutely necessary, they must then seek appropriate authorization, which typically involves consulting with management, legal counsel, or the data protection officer, and obtaining explicit consent from the affected individual or their designated representative. Documentation of the entire process, including the justification for access, the scope of data accessed, and the consent obtained, is crucial for accountability and compliance. Question 16. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a temporary, less secure password for a critical application would significantly speed up a crucial data retrieval process for a high-priority client. However, the standard operating procedure for password management explicitly prohibits sharing passwords verbally or using temporary, less secure credentials for any reason. The IT administrator is aware of the potential security risks, but also understands the client's urgent need. Option A. Create a temporary, less secure password and share it verbally with the user to expedite the data retrieval. Option B. Bypass the password requirement entirely for this specific instance to ensure immediate access. Option C. Adhere strictly to the documented password management policy, explaining to the client that while the delay is regrettable, security protocols must be maintained to protect their data. Option D. Provide the user with a new, but still less secure, password that is easier to remember and share. The correct answer is C. Adhere strictly to the documented password management policy, explaining to the client that while the delay is regrettable, security protocols must be maintained to protect their data. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it pits the perceived efficiency gains of a shortcut against the established security protocols designed to protect sensitive data. The core of the dilemma lies in balancing immediate operational needs with long-term data integrity and compliance. The temptation to bypass a security step for expediency is a common ethical pitfall. The correct approach, which involves adhering to the documented security procedures for handling sensitive data, represents best professional practice because it directly aligns with the principles of data protection and regulatory compliance. IBM notes and Domino fundamentals, as tested by C2040-442, emphasizes the importance of secure data handling. Following established protocols ensures that data remains confidential, accurate, and accessible only to authorized individuals, thereby mitigating risks of data breaches, unauthorized access, and potential legal repercussions. This adherence is a fundamental ethical obligation for IT professionals. An incorrect approach that involves sharing the password verbally or via an unsecured channel fails to uphold the principle of confidentiality. This action directly violates security best practices and could lead to unauthorized disclosure of sensitive information, a clear ethical and potential regulatory breach. Another incorrect approach, which is to simply ignore the request and not provide access, while seemingly safe, fails to address the legitimate business need and could be seen as uncooperative or inefficient, potentially damaging professional relationships and hindering productivity without a valid justification. A third incorrect approach, which is to create a new, less secure password for the user, undermines the entire purpose of strong password policies, and introduces a significant security vulnerability, directly contravening the spirit and letter of data security regulations and ethical responsibilities. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the underlying security policy and its rationale. If a shortcut is considered, a formal risk assessment should be conducted, and any deviation from policy should be documented and approved by appropriate management. When in doubt, always err on the side of caution and adherence to established security protocols. The decision-making process should involve consulting relevant documentation, seeking guidance from security or compliance officers, and prioritizing data security and regulatory adherence above immediate convenience. Question 17. Process analysis reveals a potential for significant time savings by streamlining a critical data entry workflow within the IBM Notes and Domino application. The proposed changes involve modifying forms, views, and agents to automate several manual steps. What is the most professionally responsible approach to implementing these optimizations? Option A. Make the changes directly to the production environment without any prior testing or documentation of the modifications. Option B. Deploy the optimized process to all users immediately after technical implementation to realize the time savings as quickly as possible. Option C. Focus exclusively on the technical aspects of the optimization, assuming users will adapt to the new workflow without explicit training or feedback mechanisms. Option D. Implement the optimized process in a pilot group of users first, gather feedback, and then conduct comprehensive user training before a full rollout. The correct answer is B. Deploy the optimized process to all users immediately after technical implementation to realize the time savings as quickly as possible. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization, where the desire for immediate efficiency gains clashes with the need for thorough, compliant, and user-centric implementation. The pressure to deliver results quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise data integrity, user adoption, and adherence to established IBM Notes and Domino best practices, which are implicitly governed by the need for secure and reliable data handling. The professional challenge lies in balancing speed with diligence, ensuring that the optimized process is not only faster, but also robust, secure, and sustainable within the existing Domino environment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a phased rollout and comprehensive user training. This aligns with professional best practices for process optimization in regulated environments by prioritizing data integrity and user adoption. A phased rollout allows for controlled testing and validation, minimizing the risk of widespread errors or data corruption. Thorough user training ensures that end users understand the new process, its benefits, and how to operate within it correctly, leading to higher adoption rates and reduced errors. This approach indirectly supports regulatory compliance by ensuring that data is handled accurately and consistently, which is a fundamental requirement for any system, including IBM Notes and Domino, regardless of specific jurisdiction, as it underpins auditability and data integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately deploying the optimized process to all users without pilot testing. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses critical validation steps. In a regulated context, this could lead to systemic errors, data inconsistencies, and potential breaches of data integrity, which are often subject to audit and compliance requirements. Demonstrates a failure to exercise due diligence in ensuring the reliability of the system. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on technical implementation and disregard user feedback or training. This is a significant ethical and professional failing. Processes are designed to be used by people, and neglecting user input or training leads to poor adoption, increased errors, and ultimately process failure. It shows a lack of understanding of the human element in process optimization and can result in a technically sound but practically unusable system, undermining the very purpose of optimization. A third incorrect approach is to implement changes without documenting them or assessing their impact on existing workflows and data security. This is a direct contravention of good IT governance and professional practice. Lack of documentation hinders future troubleshooting, auditing, and maintenance. Failure to assess impact on data security can lead to vulnerabilities and non-compliance with data protection principles, even if not explicitly tied to a specific regulation in this context, It violates the fundamental duty of care in IT management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, iterative approach to process optimization. This involves clearly defining objectives, analyzing the current state, designing the optimized process, piloting the changes with a representative user group, gathering feedback, refining the process, and then rolling it out with comprehensive training and ongoing support. Documentation and impact assessment should be integral throughout the lifecycle. This systematic methodology ensures that optimizations are effective, compliant, and sustainable, reflecting a commitment to quality, user satisfaction, and responsible system management. Question 18. Research into optimizing the workflow for managing user access requests within an IBM Domino environment has identified several potential strategies. Which strategy best balances efficiency gains with the need for robust security and auditability? Option A. Implementing a tiered approval system where requests for access to standard applications are automatically approved, while requests for sensitive data require manual review by a security administrator. Option B. Relying solely on end-user self-service portals for all access requests, with no intermediate verification steps to minimize administrative overhead. Option C. Automating the approval process for all access requests, regardless of the sensitivity of the data or the user's role, to expedite provisioning. Option D. Disabling all automated notifications for access requests and approvals to reduce email traffic and streamline the process. The correct answer is C. Automating the approval process for all access requests, regardless of the sensitivity of the data or the user's role, to expedite provisioning. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT environments, balancing the need for efficient process optimization with the imperative to maintain data integrity and security, particularly within the context of IBM Notes and Domino. The professional challenge lies in identifying and implementing improvements without inadvertently compromising the system's stability, user access, or adherence to established operational procedures. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between superficial changes and genuine optimizations that yield tangible benefits. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and data-driven methodology. By analyzing existing workflows, identifying bottlenecks through metrics, and proposing solutions that are tested and validated, it ensures that process improvements are effective and sustainable. This aligns with general IT best practices for change management and operational excellence, which are implicitly supported by the need for reliable and secure system operation, as expected by any regulatory framework governing data handling. Each incorrect approach carries specific regulatory or ethical failures. Implementing changes without proper analysis risks introducing vulnerabilities that could lead to data breaches or unauthorized access, violating data protection principles. Deploying solutions based on anecdotal evidence or personal preference, rather than objective data, can result in inefficient or even detrimental changes, failing to meet operational standards and potentially leading to system downtime or performance degradation, which could have compliance implications if service-level agreements are breached. Ignoring user feedback during the optimization process can lead to decreased user adoption and productivity, indirectly impacting the organization's ability to operate efficiently and meet its obligations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the current state through comprehensive analysis and data collection. This should be followed by defining clear objectives for optimization, exploring potential solutions, and rigorously testing them in a controlled environment. Implementation should be phased, with continuous monitoring and feedback loops to ensure that the desired outcomes are achieved and any unintended consequences are addressed promptly. This iterative and evidence-based approach ensures that process optimization efforts are both effective and responsible. Question 19. The evaluation methodology shows that the IBM Domino server's response times have significantly degraded, impacting user productivity and the ability to access critical business data within the defined service-level agreements. The IT team is considering several strategies to address this performance issue. Option A. Immediately apply a recently published quick-fix configuration setting from an online forum that claims to resolve common Domino performance problems without prior testing or analysis. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive performance analysis to identify specific bottlenecks, test potential configuration adjustments in a staging environment, and implement changes following a documented change management process with rollback capabilities. Option C. Focus on optimizing user interface elements within the Notes client to improve perceived performance while deferring any server-side investigations. Option D. Implement a series of undocumented, ad hoc server restarts and parameter tweaks based on anecdotal evidence from other administrators. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive performance analysis to identify specific bottlenecks, test potential configuration adjustments in a staging environment, and implement changes following a documented change management process with rollback capabilities. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT environments where the efficiency of core business applications directly impacts productivity and compliance. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for immediate performance improvements with the long-term stability and maintainability of the IBM Notes/Domino system, while adhering to established IT governance and operational best practices. A hasty, unverified change can introduce unforeseen issues, potentially leading to data corruption, security vulnerabilities, or service disruption, all of which have regulatory implications if they impact the availability or integrity of business-critical information. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven process for identifying and implementing optimizations. This aligns with best practices for IT service management, such as those outlined in ITIL frameworks, which emphasize change management, problem management, and continuous service improvement. By analyzing performance metrics, identifying bottlenecks, and testing solutions in a controlled environment before production deployment, the IT team ensures that changes are effective, minimize risk, and contribute to the overall health and compliance of the Domino infrastructure. This proactive and measured approach is crucial for maintaining system integrity and meeting any regulatory requirements related to data availability and operational resilience. An incorrect approach that bypasses thorough analysis and testing, such as immediately implementing a widely suggested but unverified configuration change, poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. This could lead to a failure to meet service-level agreements, SLAs, or even data loss, which could violate data protection regulations if sensitive information is compromised. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on cosmetic or superficial improvements without addressing underlying performance issues, is inefficient and fails to deliver tangible benefits, potentially leading to wasted resources and a continued state of suboptimal performance, which could be seen as a failure in due diligence regarding system maintenance. A third incorrect approach, involving undocumented or unauthorized modifications, directly contravenes IT governance policies and audit trails, creating significant compliance risks and making it impossible to troubleshoot or revert changes effectively, thereby undermining system security and reliability. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the problem and its impact. This involves gathering data, analyzing root causes, and evaluating potential solutions based on their effectiveness, feasibility, and risk profile. A critical step is to establish a robust change management process, including thorough testing in a non-production environment and a rollback plan. Regular performance monitoring and capacity planning are also essential components of maintaining an optimized and compliant system. Question 20. Operational review demonstrates that the Lotus Domino server's mail routing performance has significantly degraded, leading to increased delivery times and user complaints. The IT team is considering several immediate actions to address this. Which of the following actions represents the most prudent and professionally responsible approach to optimizing mail routing performance? Option A. Manually delete all old mail documents from user mailboxes to free up disk space, assuming this will improve routing speed. Option B. Immediately disable all mail journaling and replication settings to reduce server load, and then restart the Domino server. Option C. Implement a phased approach to optimize mail routing, starting with analyzing server logs for bottlenecks, followed by targeted configuration adjustments and thorough testing in a development environment before applying to production. Option D. Increase the server's RAM allocation significantly without any prior analysis of current resource utilization or mail routing patterns. The correct answer is B. Immediately disable all mail journaling and replication settings to reduce server load, and then restart the Domino server. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT environments where efficiency gains are sought through process optimization. The professional challenge lies in balancing the desire for improved performance with the need to maintain data integrity, security, and compliance with established IBM notes and Domino best practices and any applicable regulatory frameworks that might govern data handling within the organization. A hasty or ill-considered optimization can lead to unintended consequences, including data loss, performance degradation, or security vulnerabilities. The correct approach involves a systematic and phased implementation of changes, prioritizing thorough testing and validation at each stage. This aligns with professional best practices by minimizing risk and ensuring that any optimizations are effective and sustainable. It also implicitly supports regulatory compliance by ensuring that data remains accessible, accurate, and secure throughout the process. This methodical approach allows for rollback if issues arise and provides a clear audit trail of changes made. An incorrect approach that bypasses testing or documentation risks significant regulatory and ethical failures. For instance, directly implementing changes without a rollback plan could lead to data corruption or inaccessibility, violating data integrity principles and potentially breaching regulations that mandate data availability and accuracy. Failing to document changes can hinder future troubleshooting, audits, and compliance efforts, as it becomes impossible to ascertain the history of system modifications. Implementing optimizations without considering security implications could introduce vulnerabilities, exposing sensitive data and violating data protection laws and ethical obligations to safeguard information. The professional decision-making process for such situations should involve 1. Understanding the current state and identifying specific bottlenecks or inefficiencies. 2. Researching and evaluating potential optimization strategies, considering their impact on data, security, and user experience. 3. Developing a detailed plan that includes phased implementation, rigorous testing in a non-production environment, and a clear rollback strategy. 4. Obtaining necessary approvals and communicating changes to stakeholders. 5. Executing the plan, monitoring performance closely, and documenting all actions. 6. Post-implementation review to confirm the effectiveness of the optimization and identify any further adjustments needed.